Okay. I'm just gonna leave it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of Big Little Ladies. I like to start out this episode by first introducing my co-host and co-roommate slash co-mommy. She's Brazilian and she's bold and she's the bomb. So, Mac, say hey.
Oh, hey! I love it. Brazilian, bold, and bomb. So many B's. I feel like I should have a letter for you, but I'm just gonna let whatever come out, you know? She's really intelligent and awesome and chill, and she's super cool. Caitlin Miller, everyone.
Oh, thank you.
Of course, the announcer must get an announcement as well, you know.
I appreciate it. Well, we finished episode 1 talking a little bit about, of course, Big Little Lies. And that's going to be, we're going to delve a little bit more into season 1 of Big Little Lies in this episode. But do you have anything that you'd like to mention about episode 1 before we dive into the new stuff?
I mean, we did touch on episode 1, we touched on episode 2, right? Somebody's dead and serious mothering. I love the names, by the way. Like, the names of the episodes. I'm wondering if these are almost like chapter names. We should definitely read the book. Maybe that'll be season 2. Kate and Mac read the book and we compare it or whatever. But yeah, I do want to talk about a little bit. We are starting to get a sense of why Jane is in Monterey.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We're starting to get a sense that it's definitely not some, like, decision made out of a happy situation. You know, there's some trauma there. We're also starting to see just how insane Renata can be.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, of course, that's not to say we're also starting to see how insane Madeline can be, because that whole Disney on Ice situation, just, like, that's like a thing that lingers, you know?
It's a low.
Right. And it lingers for a while. Like, I feel like so many people mention it in the testimonies and stuff. So we're really starting to see that, too. And we're starting to see how the relationship that Abigail and Bonnie have, which is obviously very much more open,
Mm-hmm.
and something that Madeline is jealous of, whether she wants to admit it or not. We're starting to see how that, like, gets in her head. And of course, Celeste, we were thinking, oh my god, her and Perry, yay, and we're finally starting to see, like, oh, there's, like, a big shadow there. So
yeah, definitely not everything is not as it seems with them. And we definitely get some of that in episode 1, but definitely in episode 2 we see a different side of Perry and Celeste's relationship.
We do.
Yeah, it's really interesting. They in the first 2 episodes they kind of delve a little bit into the dynamic between the women. You understand that you're following the women's stories, but you're not sure necessarily why these women, and, like, in particular, and, like, what they have to do with each other than all having children in the same class. And so, yeah, it's definitely leaves you, like, ready for the 3rd episode.
Right.
And the 4th.
That is called Living the Dream. Living the Dream. Would you like to read the synopsis for us, Caitlin, or shall I?
Sure, I will. It's episode 3, Living the Dream. Perry chokes Celeste when he believes she deliberately left him out of a family gathering, after which Celeste threatens to leave him. Renata's party for Amabella is a huge success, but she is ultimately upset when Madeline invited Amabella's closest friends and Ziggy to Disney on Ice on the same day. At therapy, Perry claims his outbursts are out of fear that Celeste does not love him, which Celeste attempts to deny. When Abigail's academic performance begins to decline, her guidance counselor suggests it is being caused by stress at home, so she decides to live with Nathan, much to Madeline's dismay. Jane gets Ziggy involved with more extracurricular activities and helps him construct a family tree for school with Madeline's help. However, Jane opposes Ziggy's insistence upon putting his father's name on the tree, and she ultimately confides to Madeline that Ziggy was the result of rape by a man named Saxon Banks, whom she has not seen since. Reading it, I'm like, I have the chill bumps already.
Right? This is crazy. It does get pretty crazy at this point. And again, living the dream, right? How, like, more sarcastic could this be?
The irony.
The irony. Literally, I mean, I guess you could say that Jane is living the nightmare that she experienced through, except it's her son getting accused, you know, but there is a little girl like actually experiencing a degree of assault. And then you have, of course, it's just so interesting. You have Perry and Celeste kind of living in this dream, right, where they're one way with each other, and then out to the world they're completely different people, which is interesting. And this is the first time we see her therapist with the two of them together, I think.
Yeah, and I like remember this scene where the therapist is really just trying to draw out the abuse from Celeste, and like Perry's there. And so that's definitely an interesting dynamic with the therapist and what her role in this entire thing is, because she's the only, like you said in the last episode, she's the only one who seems to be aware. But then she also, some of the questions, the way she like goes about things and roundabout her like sly, like she doesn't judge, but she'll give her opinion and things, and that's an interesting thing to sort of break down a little bit too, the therapist.
Yeah, it's like sometimes it's almost like she's well-intentioned, but sometimes it feels like she's sitting so far away from them. And at the same time too, this is another thing that you could say, like, oh my god, like why would they portray a therapist like that? That is the majority of therapists out there. Like,
it's hard to relate to a stranger.
It is, much less a stranger that is, you know, bound. But I mean, I get it, there are laws and things, but there are so many restrictions around therapists, especially in states where like certain, like if a patient confides something and it has to do, like, you know, maybe if they confide, okay, say someone is like 15 and they have an 18-year-old boyfriend, completely consensual, totally fine. If that 15-year-old confides that she's having, you know, sex with her 18-year-old boyfriend, in some states the therapist is like legally obligated to say something. And so it's like, how can you have trust in that, and then how can you relate to somebody when you're literally confined by so many arbitrary, and yes, some of them are very arbitrary rules that basically doesn't allow you to go on a case by case when it comes to your patients. So it's like, I get the constriction, but it is frustrating to literally watch a therapist like be so unrelatable and so aware at the same time.
You think she'd be aware that she's unrelatable.
Right. Or like try to find a better way to go about it.
Yeah, it is important, I feel like, that they portrayed her in that way, because it is, you know, a lot of people fear therapy for that reason too, because I've had, like, personally, I've had a couple of therapists, and I've had some really good ones, and I've had some where like I didn't really feel like they could help me in that time or whatever, and that's okay. But it definitely, you know, therapy, maybe conventional therapy isn't for everyone, but there's definitely some type of therapy for everyone, and so it's like
finding it.
Yeah, finding it. Madeline interests me a lot in this episode, because like you said with the Disney on Ice thing, it's kind of emotional torture for like, she definitely was not thinking about Annabella at all. Like, it was definitely like just the moms, and it's like, it's not emotional abuse, like, but
I mean, like, it is though.
Yeah, like the child is like paying the percussions of whatever, and Madeline is like doing it because Ziggy's feelings were hurt, and she's having zero like sympathy for Annabella. So it's really interesting that it's so like one-sided for her. It's definitely agenda and not like actually trying to do the right thing.
Right.
And then, you know, with later on, whenever, you know, Madeline and Jane, like Madeline's trying to help Jane with the family tree, I don't know, it's weird. Like, Madeline, I can't decide if her intentions are good, or if she's just there because she wants, you know, because there's something, you know, in the back of her mind that, like, because that she like needs that like information. It's so weird.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay, no, oh man, I'm so fired up about this. Madeline is one of my favorite characters because she's one of those people that you can't help but love, But you watch her make these destructive. It's like a Game of Thrones character that like made. It's like Ned Stark when he made his bed and he died, and everyone was just like, "Man, we can't fucking help you because you made all this shitty decisions.
You did this, yeah.
You did this to yourself." And Madeline, I definitely feel what you're saying. It's like she literally did not at all think about Amabella. But I also want to bring it back to like there is ownership that needs to be taken by Renata, because it's not like Renata comes in there trying to make friends.
True.
Renata, like, I feel for her, but at the same time, she is the epitome of a person, like, building walls to literally keep pain in and, like, keep everybody else out. So it's just, like, and
Yeah.
her husband said it in, like, in this season, in the second season. He said something about, like, it took forever for me to, like, chip away at your walls. And then ever since, you know, The Lie or whatever, you know. So we'll get to next season soon,
Later on,
very
yeah.
soon. But yeah, there is some ownership that, like, Amabella is, it's almost like she's walled up by her mom's walls. She like can't help but be walled up by her mom's walls. And so, man, it's like a whole circle of accountability and nobody takes any.
True, because I mean, Renata could have reversed the situation. She could have invited Ziggy. She could have, you know, she could have talked to Amabella about it and asked Amabella, like, are you and Ziggy okay? Especially after the whole kiss thing that happened in, you know, the second episode.
Right.
It's like a whole different. So there were definitely things that, you know, if she were conscious in that moment, could have, like, it's easy to say in hindsight, obviously, and it's also, you know, meant to be portrayed in a certain way. But yeah, for sure. And also, like, with like going like with her and Madeline's dynamic. Madeline, I mean, in this, I think it was this episode, they said that, oh yeah, her oldest daughter moves back in with her husband.
Right.
And it's like, is she taking out her frustration, like, in the, you know, I feel like a lot of her anger, she's just, like, pushing it on to, like, this situation. She's like, Ziggy, you know, like, she's, like, it's none of really her business whether or not Ziggy's actually invited to the party or not, but she's, like, making it her business. And it's like, she has things that she could be, like, focusing on at home, obviously, like, it shows. And that's the majority of the people. Like, it is a lot easier to focus on other people's issues instead of, like, feel through and fix your own. And that's, like, I feel like where she's at with her daughter right now. They're, like, haven't been able to, like, fix anything. And so it's just getting worse and
Well, and she doesn't talk to Abigail.
Right.
Every time she talks at Abigail, but she doesn't talk to Abigail. And I want to say, like, Lord, I hope there are actually, like, older women listening to this podcast that are moms, because, like, talking at your children doesn't work. And if you don't want to listen to two quote-quote children about this, then you can get off the podcast. I don't care. Like, talking at your children will never work. I was a nanny for years. Do you really think that talking at a 2-year-old is going to help them feel better when they scrape their knee or when they do something wrong? Like, even when I used to put kids in timeouts, like, before I did it, I gave them a choice. Always. It was always their choice. You know what I mean? Like, and it wasn't a cruel choice either. You know what I mean? It's like, I can sit here with you in silence as you cry, or, you know, you can scream by yourself while I stand over here looking at you. You know what I mean? Like, it's still, but I feel like she's never giving her girls a choice. It's always just like, it's like, do this or don't, and if you don't, I'm gonna be mad at you. And it's just like, okay, well, you're asking your kids to literally pick between connection, which is, like, the number one top human need in the world, and anyone who disagrees can definitely relate to the experience that I've gotten broken up with, and now I can't eat or drink anything. So, like, you know what I mean? Connection. You're literally asking your daughter to pick between connection and doing what you want her to do, which is fucked up.
it is fucked up.
And how does she, like...
And as a teenager, too.
Dude, as a teenager,
It's one thing to be 6 and only have so many options because you're relying upon other people, but and that's why she's moving out. Like, I get the moving out, and that's how, I mean, I think a lot of people in their teenage years, they're like, when can I get out of here? Like, yesterday, please. And so I'm glad that they did do that, because that's how a lot of people feel. And of course, it's not the, like, most... like, it's not the best way to fix an issue. I'm sure it gives it some space. It's maybe, like, the first...
Exactly.
It's, like, the first step to restructuring. But, yeah, it's
kind of an awakening for Madeline, I think, that she needs to, like, rework her approach when it comes to parenting Abigail.
Yeah, for sure. And then, I guess, the, like, the big we finally find out what happened to Jane. We don't know why she's in Monterey, but we do find out, you know, because we've seen a lot of scary flashbacks, but we're not sure exactly what. A lot of running on the beaches.
I know. Some very, like, maybe figurative, maybe real,
Yeah, it's like,
maybe metaphorical.
like, what do I grasp from this?
Not sure what's going on. No, for sure. We finally find out, like, why she's running away and what she's running away, so to speak.
And we find out how it's affecting Ziggy.
Yeah.
Which is big too. He kind of has like
the family tree,
an angry moment, and sort of yells at his mom about his dad, and those feelings are so I mean, he should feel that, but you know, taking them out in that way, it's hard as a kid to, and then like someone not having a father, not knowing, like seeing him, you know, it's difficult with mom. I feel like as a boy. Not experiencing like how men would deal with certain issues or certain confrontations and things. So their dynamic is really interesting because there's a lot of love there.
Yeah, you can definitely tell that Jane, like, I mean, I honestly admire the shit out of Jane. I would have aborted that kid the second, like, I don't, I'm sure we're gonna be real scandalous because I just said this because I'm not editing it out. I would have aborted that child because the truth of the matter is that 9 months is a whole long fucking time to carry something you fucking hate. I'm just gonna say that. And I'm not mature enough, if that's what it is, and I'm not, like, holy enough to say that I would be able to carry my rapist's child and be able to raise it with the kind of love that Jane does. So, like, kudos to fucking Jane because she really, like, has the biggest heart. And however, though, you're right, like, she's not a man. And arguably, let's bring up Perry, even boys with supposedly perfect fathers
still don't necessarily learn how to be a good man.
And don't necessarily know where to channel their anger. I feel like the anger is a huge theme of this show. Like, I love how our characters, we see them express their anger. Some in healthy ways, some in others. Like, Ed, he's got a real good way of expressing his anger. Right. He exercises it out. Ed is probably the most, maybe healthy. This season he's a little wobbly, but, like, he's pretty stable as far as people go. And, yeah, I definitely feel that anger in this show is, like, a big thing. And Jane is not necessarily teaching Ziggy how to channel his anger. You know? Yeah. So when he channels it at her, I mean, you can't help but, like, if you're looking on the outside in, I mean, I've granted some moms by totally because, you know, they are so sucked up into the mom perspective, which is totally valid, might be like, oh my god, like, how could he, blah, 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 blah. But really, Ziggy's valid, like.
And I mean, she also made the choice in the show to tell him the truth about sort of where he came from. She decided not to, you know, lie or whatever. And that's really, I mean, kudos. That, and I don't think I'm not sure I'd be able to do that. It's a really difficult thing to communicate with a child about, let alone even be willing to speak about it with an adult yourself. But yeah, it's true. Like their dynamic is really interesting because not having the dad.
Yeah, and I mean, and just Jane not. It took her a while. I feel like she had to be pushed to the brink to tell him, but it's a good thing that eventually she does. You know?
Yeah, I just remember, like, when she was explaining to Madeline, she was like, I, want to do everything for Ziggy, like, I want him to feel, like, but, like, he's not putting his dad's name on that effing tree. She was like, it's never gonna happen, and I understand that as a woman, why she would never want that to happen or whatever, but I don't think she understands it from her kid's perspective. And that's like where that I guess argument came from, is like they can't understand each other in that moment, and not many people could.
It's true.
It's a really difficult situation to be in the middle of.
Right, and that's kind of what we're left with basically at the end of that episode. So let's go on to episode 4.
Push comes to shove.
Push comes to shove. So Abigail moves in with Nathan and Bonnie. Celeste legally represents Joseph and Madeline in a meeting with the mayor regarding the controversial Avenue Q and successfully persuades the mayor to allow the play to proceed. In the process, Celeste realizes her desire to return to work. She asks her therapist how to best convince Perry, but Dr. Raisman is more concerned with why she is afraid to do so. At home, Perry tells Celeste not to attend any future meetings. When she refuses, he grabs her by the throat but quickly relinquishes when one of the boys enters the room. Joseph and Madeline kiss, and it is revealed that they had an affair a year ago. Madeline locates a man online whom she believes to be Saxon Banks, but she informs Jane, Celeste, and they plan to travel to San Luis Obispo to confront him. Miss Barnes, the teacher, suspects Amabella is still being bullied. Despite Amabella's assertions that she and Ziggy are friends, Miss Barnes requests Jane to have Ziggy psychologically evaluated, but the psychologist believes that Ziggy is innocent and that he may actually be being bullied himself. Whew, that was a lot. Sorry,
They're
guys.
so heavy.
I know, it's very tense. Hopefully practice makes perfect. Okay, let's start with, so Abigail moves in with Nathan and Bonnie. That happens. And then we kind of...
I feel like... Sorry.
And then, I don't know if it's this episode or an episode like sooner, but we start to realize that she gets a lot less supervision under Nathan and Bonnie. And that is a good thing, but we're going to find out later on that it may be a little bit questionable. However, I definitely believe it helped her stress levels. So, however, I'm more interested in Celeste and Perry this episode and their relationship, as well as this whole thing with her going back to work and, Madeline and Joseph. We haven't really touched on that at all. Madeline is on the side, she's got this part-time job in the community theater where she puts on musicals and things, and they're doing Avenue Q. Joseph is the director, right? And basically, Renata and some moms are saying Avenue Q is way too mature for the community, and Celeste is helping them out in the situation, and it makes her realize she really loves going back to work, which we didn't even know what she did up until now. I think in the show, like, we weren't really aware of exactly what she did.
Right, we just, from the other people, like the interviews from like the police station, they say she was very successful, but they never really got into exactly like how she was successful. And this episode definitely like it kind of shows what Celeste was before. And it really, because in the beginning, or at the end of the last episode, no, I guess it's in the beginning of this one, whenever she like decided she wanted to work, but she got, I think it was the last episode, I don't remember.
She told Madeline she'd help them, I think the last episode, but like this was the day of the trial.
But yeah, it like is a stark contrast between her like, never mind.
What do you mean, like her at home versus her?
Yeah, like her like super successful life, and like everything that they like show her, and like her like wanting to get back to work, like who she was, and now like in her relationship with Perry, like even talking to her therapist, like how could I even get back? Like she's very stuck.
Yeah.
And it like really contrasts like where she was before him, and like the type of person that she seemed like she was, like very strong, independent lawyer, and now being like not even, being able to work, like having to like being afraid to even ask if she could do this side job or whatever.
Right, something that she really wants to do. And this is when we start to see and get an inkling into their relationship is very dysfunctional. To the point of being intensely violent, right? And we get like our first peek into like what happens if one of the boys walks into the room? Okay, right. Perry stops, but then he's already seen something. One of the boys has already seen something. And I mean, it's like, spoiler alert, Ziggy is being bullied, and it's either, I don't know who it is, Max or Josh, but it's one of them.
I think it's Max.
Okay. And I mean, where do we think he learned that from?
Yeah, like, well, I mean, children are very, like, keen to energy, as, like, if their mom's, like, dead afraid, like, they're gonna tune into that, as well as sound. It's not like they can't hear screaming from upstairs. Like, you may not be able to visibly see it, but if your mom's literally yelling or, like, for her life upstairs, like, you're gonna be aware of that. Like, you know that's going on, and you know it's not, like, consensual in any type of way.
Right, and if you walk in with your dad, like, abusing your mom, like, what makes you think that it's not okay for you to go and abuse a girl in your school?
Right.
And this is, like, that's one of the things that, like, is really important to think about, too, is, like, there needs to be honesty, right? Like, I know that these kids are young, but I don't know, what would happen if the second that Perry laid a hand on Celeste, she had left, you know what I mean? And she had just been like, you know, Daddy hit Mommy, and that's not okay, and so we're not going to be with Daddy for, like, a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You're still going to get to see Daddy, but we're not going to be living together because Mommy's afraid, and that's not okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there are ways to simplify it for them where you can still, where you can get yourself out of a toxic environment.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's just accompanying Celeste's choices, especially juxtaposing her to, like, this strong lawyer person we see at the beginning of this episode, it's frustrating.
And one thing that's difficult, I think, for kids is, like, parents try really hard to look perfect for their children.
Oh, dude, yeah.
And kids need to learn that life, it's not perfect. Like, you can't be perfect. Like, they need to know that when they're young. And it's okay that their dad isn't perfect and that he has these issues, but it's not okay that he's not getting help. And it's not okay that he takes them out on Celeste. Like, no, like, everyone has their things. Celeste obviously has her own issues where, like, she doesn't feel like she can voice or go, you know, to someone to get help. So it's like, nobody's perfect. Like, everybody has their own, like, thing. And I feel like people try really hard to not let their kids understand that, but I think that's one of the, like, most important things for them to get at that age. And so it's like, yeah, that's an interesting thing too for the kids. But I think one of the craziest things in this episode is, like, Madeline. She's everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, I get she's working on this play and it's really important, but she's, like, going to the mayor. She's like, this play is gonna happen, and she's, like, fighting really hard for Joseph, who kind of doesn't care as much. She's just like, whatever, it's done. Like, we're just gonna do a different one.
Right.
And, you know, in the end, they say they kiss and that they had an affair a year ago. And then she also later on butts herself into the whole Jane thing. Like, she's just, like, worried about everything that, like, has nothing, like, to do with her own issues and her own family issues with her own husband and her own kids. Like, she's, like, worried about everybody else's thing and, like, cannot
focus on her own damn family.
Herself.
Like, her own life. I know, it's true. And then she goes to, as far as informing Jane and Celeste and them, and basically, like, they plan a trip to San Luis Obispo to do what?
Confront
like that's
a
my
rapist.
thing. I'm just like, what do you, like, especially, this isn't even, like, a rapist. Like, this isn't a guy that had felonies under him. This isn't a guy that, like, pulled her over in an alley. Like, this is a guy who fucking got a hotel, like, had enough, the means to get a hotel, to fucking buy her a drink, to charm her, and then motherfucking rape her. Like, what do they think they're gonna do? I don't know.
No, I get it. It's like they love to solve their issues by, like, not solving their issues. Like, they like to just do, like, the, like, thing that they don't think about it very hard. They're like, oh yeah, let's go see him, but they're like, what are we gonna do when they don't think about that part, or they don't even think about why they want to go see him. Like, who's it gonna help? I mean, unless Jane's like, yeah, like, she didn't seek him out. Like, Madeline sucked him out.
Right, Madeline's the one who, and then, of course, let's not forget, too, that we get a little inkling that Jane has a gun in this episode. And, I mean, for a second there, like, they make us think that she might just pull the trigger at this guy, you know what I mean? Like, so it's definitely a slippery slope. Like, I don't think Jane is far enough in her grieving process, in her, like, emotional acceptance process, in order to even get, like, 20 kilometers or 20 miles away from this guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just don't think it's a great idea. And then, of course, the one thing that I feel like does come out of this episode that's pretty good is, you know, I mean, I was happy that Madeline won, because I'm always one for, like, having progressive musicals, and I'm just like, if it's a Community, just make it a fucking 18+ show. Who cares?
Right.
And then have fucking Little Mermaid Jr., you know, like,
Mm-hmm.
next time. Whatever. Like, community theater is for the community, and guess what? There are adults in the community. So that was cool. But like the coolest thing I think that came out of this episode is we finally we get a professional opinion on Ziggy, and we officially find out, okay, he's actually not the bully. Because I feel like that was the writers and everybody telling us like, no, like he's out, he's no longer suspect.
Mm-hmm.
This has to be. And at that moment I was like, okay, it's Max or Josh.
And you know the way that they portray, I mean, obviously like him being a child of rape and like all of that, and the way that they also did like some flashbacks of like him having like nightmares and things. You weren't sure whether or not Ziggy was like telling the truth or not, and it's like a huge relief. Like I feel like at the end of this episode, but then you're also like, well then, who was it? And you know, like we said, later on we find out it was one of the twins, and it makes sense. But yeah, that was a huge. I think that was probably one of the biggest things to come out, and to find that, you know, he was also possibly being bullied, is sad.
It is, because he is such a sweet kid. And I mean, at the end of the day, they are all really sweet kids. And I love that we're diving into this the way that we are. I don't honestly think that anybody's talking about this show or shows at all in the way that we are.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's one of the things that's really special about this podcast, but just coupling it with this show is like, this is literally what's going on out there in elite communities. Like for people out there, you know, who are middle class or below and honestly think rich people have no problems, and honestly think that rich people aren't fucked up in the head, and honestly think rich people weren't heavily traumatized as children. Because I'll tell you what, people that act like these people, and people that act like people, they were traumatized as children, and now they're doing the same thing to their children that we're seeing, keeping secrets from them because it quote quote protects them, supposedly, you know, like, and they're doing all these things, and we're seeing how the repeating of these patterns can have deep repercussions. And if we can bring awareness to that, then maybe some of us will turn out to be different parents.
Yeah, a lot of the emotional trauma that these kids face in the movie is a direct result of their parents' actions. And we get to see that dynamic really well, because people don't understand where bullying comes from. They're like, why do we have cyberbullies? But it's that exactly. It's them, you know, picking up on exactly how they're being taught, like what good or bad. A lot of parents are like, teach or do as I say, not as I do. And it's like the most painful parenting technique I experienced, because it's never gonna work. And
no,
it's like that's what it feels like for some of these kids, is they're a result of the situation that they're put in. And
yeah. And the last thing that I want to touch on, because we're going to touch on the last 3 episodes of the first season in the 3rd episode, so check us out over there. But before we completely move on, I really want to touch on the fact that Amabella is the only one that seems to literally go the polar opposite way of her mother. Right? Like, we have one of the twins acting like their father, you know, and even like Celeste a little bit. Celeste can get pretty violent too, you know, to protect herself and things like that. You know, you have Chloe very much like Madeline. I mean,
very top of, she's the, you know, the coolest girl in the class.
And you've got Sky, who's kind of like Bonnie, kind of on the chill side. But then you got Amabella, and I feel, and this happens too, guys, by the way, because it's not just, you know, some kids don't turn into their parents, they turn into the polar opposite because they do not, by any means, under any circumstance, want to be their parents. And I definitely feel that that's where Amabella's at with Renata. I mean, she sees her mom blow up at everything. So, of course, the girl gets bitten, and her first reaction is like, oh, no, it's fine, because she doesn't want to make a scene, because guess who's making a scene all the motherfucking time? Her mom.
And she knows as soon as her mom finds out that it's
game over.
Yep.
There is a scene happening.
It's funny, like, I like, that happens sometimes, like, with parents who, like, people who are embarrassed that their parents smoke, like, cigarettes. They're like, sorry, my parents, you know, and then, like, they, like, are never, and, like, also with alcoholics, if your parents are, like, really, like, drink a lot, and, like, some kids will, like, continue to, like, you know, the cycle of alcoholic or, like, drug addict, and then some kids are like, I will never touch it. I'm, like, scared to death of that shit because of my parents. And so, it's funny, like, what causes them to go this way or that way.
Exactly. And I mean, I'm not saying that either. I mean, sure, I don't want kids to ever touch cigarettes, and they're probably better for never touching alcohol. But I'm not saying that going towards the other extreme is great either. There's not a lot of discernment in that either. That's just fear. That's just pushing away, you know, instead of seeking to understand. But I mean, I guess it's hard to learn empathy and how to understand another person when your primary caregivers have no idea how to do so. And I definitely believe that is something that Renata could definitely work on, is this, because for someone who's as successful as she is, she literally has zero people skills.
Yeah, and I mean that like kind of comes like full circle with me, like me experiencing such loss at such a young age. Like there were two ways that I could go. I could either be grateful or I could like let it take me over. And I had a very emotionally aware and supportive mom who let me feel everything that I needed to feel and then picked me up whenever I needed to be picked up, or supported me when I, held me when I needed to be. And that's a huge reason that, I am able to, or like to have these types of conversations now. And it's interesting seeing, a lot of kids who don't necessarily have that relationship with their mom. And that's like maybe the reason why they do carry on the worst traits, or, whatever.
Or in the very least carry on with no awareness.
Right.
And I think we're going to start, these women do start to become a little bit aware as we go on, but not enough to the point of like complete awareness, I want to say, but we'll talk about that next episode, because we're going to be talking about the last 3 episodes in the next episode: Once Bitten, Burning Love, and You Get What You Need. But we have story time. That's right, let's do some story time, and then we're gonna leave you guys to the next episode. So